that I actually had a live drawing session this morning, but I kind of messed it up a bit. I wasn't quite all over how to set it up properly using the app, and so it finished up being the wrong way, a portrait orientation rather than horizontal. So yeah, it was a nice drawing. I thought it was a great demo, but unfortunately that kind of messed it up. So I thought I'd do another one because I have since then found a YouTube video on how to set it up in landscape mode. So as you can see, I've been able to do that, and I thought I would draw a scene that was taken around the same building that I drew this morning, where we concentrated on the foliage in a number of hedges. I'll just grab, this was the drawing that we did this morning in an hour. Well, I did this morning in an hour. Actually, a reminder, I must post the reference on my community page, and I will post today's reference on my community page as well, if you'd like to draw it. And we really focused on these hedges and the idea of them stepping back slightly, but overlapping and still being quite clear, because in life they were slightly different greens, and that made them quite distinctive. And that's always a challenge, of course, when we draw with pen. Now, today's drawing is something similar, and I'm not going to talk too much at this point. I'm going to just introduce the session, and I'll put the camera, my iPhone, into the mount, and we'll have a look at it. So let's do that, shall we? Just excuse the messing round. Here we go. I might just move it a little bit closer. That certainly is a little bit, isn't it? And I'll get rid of the boxes that I had to stand on, and I think we're pretty good to go. I'll just focus and lock the focus in place. Lock the focus, so that's good to know. And look, if you find this helpful, please remember the thumbs up. Now, one thing, if you watch my channel, you might know that I do, is I recommend that before I start, I always do what I call my mark making experimentation. So, sorry, I was just trying to see how I can see the chat, but I'll see if I can do that in a minute. And this was what I did for this morning's session, and you can see, so here was my picture, and I was really exploring this crucial area where there were boundaries between the different types of hedging and foliage. Now, for this one, this foreground section is going to be the key part of our scene. And so my marks were exploring doing the grasses, trying to somehow capture the effect I want. And see, I want to use a 0.3. I want a pen has a little bit of grunt in its thickness when I want it, but I also want a pen where I can kind of get a heavier line or a much lighter effect if I want it, as depending on how much pressure and the angle I hold it. And the good thing about this is what I learned in these were my very first marks, and you can see how they're just a bit too heavy for what they are. And so now I know that with the very first marks, I need to go a bit lighter. So these are the things we learn when we explore. I also explored how I was going to do this shadowed area, and I'm happy with that. And I've also worked out that I need to work hard at being a bit smaller and to keep, if you like, the horizontal strips of various elements tighter. So they were really valuable things I learned in, whatever that was. It was probably like 5 or 6 minutes of just mark making. All right. So, I'm just wondering how I can find the chat, how I can see it. So, I don't need to see it right now. I will try and find it at the end, and then if I end up disconnecting, it won't matter. So, but please put your comments, put any questions. If you have questions about the drawing, just in case I don't get to answer them because I don't get to see the chat while I'm live, please ask them as a comment and I'll answer them as a comment. But for now, I need to start. So I'm establishing this line across here, and also establishing where approximately I want the top of this building to shrub to come. And now here, this garden bed here. So the idea with using these dots, of course, is that they'll be hidden at the end. So halfway in my scene is about here. So halfway on my paper is about here. And so this point there is going to be about here. Now I've got to be careful to keep it compressed, to not make these elements too wide. So that's the thing I'm paying attention to. And this one actually comes down a bit. The shadowed area comes down below this. So need to show a bit of just slowing down and observation there. So I'm starting with just some of these rocks. Edges are really important with all of this grass. So I do, and sometimes we're going to establish the grass through positive space, through what we draw, and sometimes it's going to be through negative space, through where the darkness meets the light. With hatching, whether I start at the bottom to go up or the top to go down, it really depends on where I want the most controlled, the controlled movement to be. And often when we draw negative space in, it's the opposite to what we would normally do. So where I want a hard edge, that's the best place to start, basically. And I learned from my mark making that I want to stay fairly light with all of these marks. I can always come across and go darker later. And if you're finding this helpful, please hit the like button for me now. That will help me. So you can see what I'm doing. I'll keep doing it. So looking at this grass here, I'm really looking at the shadow that comes in behind it. And so I don't want to go sort of higher than that. Or I could actually look at this to get a more accurate view of the height. This is probably better because it overrules any mistakes I've made so far with this distance in. And I can also see that I'm looking about that far from the center and about that high. Yep. And I've got this here. So light marks, little, I think of these as kind of frisky marks. We don't need too many like this. There's more here than we're going to draw. If we draw them all, we'll actually be less able to work out what's happening. So we want to keep all this very, very light. Now, in terms of value, the darkest area is up here under this. It's a fig tree actually. They've got some bags over some figs to protect them from the birds. So I don't want to go super dark here, even in the darker spots, because I want that value to be able to be darker. Let me see, what have I, so that's that. I think it's always interesting when a part of a drawing that often is very much a less important part suddenly requires a lot more attention and emphasis. It really pushes us out of just automatic habit in the way we draw and really forces us to consider, have I actually developed a way of thinking, an approach that hang on, I'm just I think I'm going to establish this outline now, at least a provisional outline. So let's sort of take it to here. So it's sort of like halfway through that if we're trying to roughly stay balanced. Again, don't want to make it larger than it really is. But it is going to be an interesting, I mean, visually it's probably the focal point. After this, we sort of bounce from here to there. Okay, and I'm also looking now at this distance. So I'm here, and the question is, so from there to there is sort of here. So look, it's probably just slightly higher. So probably that's the spot I'm looking at here now with this. Again, I'm not going to go as dark with this as I will, because and in fact we can bring this down more, which it needs to, oh, that's right, but we do have these. There's some sort of leafy thing here that's just catching the light. And we don't want to try and draw it precisely. We just want to create the effect of that. And it's mostly going to be by a little bit of the page with less ink. And so now here, so notice I haven't drawn the rock through the grass because that helps it to sit a little neater. And in here, and we've got this shadow line coming across that kind of undulates. So I want to avoid a straight line that doesn't. No, it's lower down than that. Or it needs to come lower down. And it's capturing these undulations that helps give it interest too. All right, I'll finish this side before I do that. The bulk of our time is going to be spent along here and here. The rest of it will end up being drawn very quickly. I reckon 15% of the time will go to this and the bulk here, and yet it will work really well at the end. It will feel like, in some ways, this is the subject, but that will be very straightforward to draw. So we've got, this is kind of like the, so that's what we're focusing on. And the other thing is not to equally space everything when we're doing things such as clumps. We want to get a feeling of sort of a randomness to it, because that's how it is in nature. And it's very easy just to go do, 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 and do big blades of grass all equally spaced. And it's what happens when we switch to autopilot and we stop focusing on every mark that we're making. So trying to avoid long, straight, hard lines, continuous lines, not straight but continuous unbroken lines, because they will not capture the effect that we're after. Before I do my next drawing session, I will find out how to make sure I can see the chat during the session. Okay, so, and there will be, now I don't want to make whatever I do for the grass down here too strong, because I really want the eyes to come in at this level, not to sort of then drift down to here. And that will partly happen by just strengthening the darks here once we've got the relative values more. And as I thought, this needs to come a bit higher. And you can see that I'll hide that without any problem. So that's why these dots are such a great way to establish outline when we're drawing subjects such as this, where a line is just not going to be helpful to establish. And there is kind of like that direction with the sun. So yeah, so I might actually firm this bush up a little bit now, I think. Now, I said it's a fig. I'm not trying to draw fig leaves, although they are quite distinctive. But I do want to get the sense that we can sort of, this is a large leaf plant, and we can kind of, we can see them without starting to draw fig leaves in detail. So I'm sort of, there's a bit of a band of darkness that sort of arcs around, and so I'm just going to follow that for now, and that makes it easier for me to just align what I'm doing with my reference to. But I still want to put this as big picture marks still. I don't want to get bogged down too much. Silhouettes are always important. So now I'm sort of coming back along here. Sorry, I'll resist the urge to start humming without realizing it. I actually find this a very, very calming way to draw. I quite like slipping into the zone. The only problem, as I mentioned earlier, is that we just start to do things on autopilot and we stop the careful observation that we had at the start. But equally, as we move on, we do, or we should, become more confident as well in the marks that we're making. Okay, so finish this bush. How are we going for time? 22 minutes. Well, that's not too bad. As I said, it will actually come together very quickly once I finish this. And if we end up feeling that things have become a little too regular, just to break them up somehow, just to put something that sticks out more than the others, just to introduce that sense of random back into it, that we may have just put too many lines in to sustain. So we want to just keep an eye on the overall thing, not just the little part we're focused on. I think that's how we end up overworking the drawing. We just focus, get bogged down on the part we're doing, and we therefore keep doing each part the same, and we fail to maintain the variety of values and shapes and patterns that they all create in life. And then that looks very artificial. All the time, not just doing the little detail, but thinking of this as basically a squashed ball with the sun coming down from high-ish up strongly. So we want to maintain the right pattern, the right effect of the sunlight on the overall thing, as well as every little part. So we really need to be, with our focus and our thinking, jumping from the little part I'm doing, the whole thing, the little part I'm doing, the whole thing. So I've got this line here, and I'm going to add and so this is going to become our shaded area. So So I might do that next because that is going to take a bit of concentration. And please, if you're finding this interesting, please hit the like button. And if you don't have time to watch all this now, then please come back later when it's posted. What I'm trying to do now is to see where there are shadows within the shadows, because that's where I'm going to try and introduce shadows within the shadows. So I'm going to do those shadowed areas first, and then I'm going to cover the whole thing in more shadow. And I want to go reasonably dark with this and reasonably tight with lots of lines, because that will create the effect of sunshine. And this is sort of darker than further over as well. So these are all the little things we need to see, and we need to work on those. We don't need to agonize over exactness. I'm not doing line for line the grasses, but this is hopefully going to create the effect that we're after. Just observe how far back I'm holding my pen. If we take off the top, I'm actually holding it certainly no closer than halfway down. And that lets me make a lot of very quick, brisk strokes, which I think are great when it comes to hatching and the marks, where once we've worked out what we're doing, we're really after quantity more than quality. As I said, always in control, always with intention. Okay. So now I'm starting to establish some generalized hatching, which is to do with creating the shadow. And I do want this to be dark. And I'll be able to add some more sort of contrast into it as well later, should I so want to. And if you're picking up some helpful thoughts about the drawing process, please hit the like button for me. And that really does help me out. Creators keep asking for that, because it really is a way you can show that this has been helpful and help us out at the same time at very little cost to yourself. So I really am trying to make these hatching lines as light as I possibly can. Whoops, that's a bit too heavy, that. But I want to avoid making them too like up and down too consistently. Actually, I'll been making these lines too large. I've been using the same size as down here, which is a big mistake because these are much further away than here. So that's now making it confusing to actually read distance. So I'm glad I spotted that, because I'll stop doing it certainly, but also I can point out, and hopefully you can see the impact of that. Unfortunately, I've passed the stage in life where I need to be successful in everything I do, and if I mess things up, then that gives me another spot to teach. Normally I'm not a fan of not lifting the pen between strokes, but sometimes I think it works okay. All right, so now I'm going to go just a lot more in this direction to give a generalized sense of the ground and being flat. Hatching is always an adventure. You're never sure whether you're going to ruin everything with a bad choice about line direction, but I do want a strong sense that this is flat ground. And let me see. So this lines up with just a bit to the right. Yep, and that's fine. And then this is slightly higher. We're about that far in from the end. One benefit of putting this tape is that it gives me more reference points. And I'm looking at this gap now. Again, you can't do that if you're drawing from life, but it's all good practice at observation. And it's that far in from the end. Yeah, I think it should be a little bit further over that way. And I can check the angle, which will help me work out if that's in the right spot. Yeah, that one's a better one, but I will check the other side too, which doesn't line up as well. So maybe it doesn't need to be higher. Excuse my whistling. Well, it's not really whistling, is it? Yeah, and see, this line is the problem now. It's not nearly right. So I'm going to make it a bit more right. And I'm going to adjust this tree a little bit to hide that. I often talk about in my videos not getting highly strung with things that aren't quite right. And by not quite right, I just mean where we wish we hadn't put that mark there in that way. So this gives me a chance anyway to show you how I do that, how I make a correction. Now, that's maybe even slightly too dark for what I want to do here, but let's just see how we go. So now I want to have really lighter. So, with a little care, we really can get a great variety of marks, of values from our This isn't a window, this is actually, I think then perhaps once there was some sort of pulley system here that this was used to haul up furniture to the upper floor. So I do want though to give a sense of this darkness. Equally, I really don't want it to be. Now I don't know whether those timber marks are going to come through. And I'm going to leave it deliberately light at this point, and I can certainly make this darker if at the end I make it stronger if I feel that's necessary. You'll notice that because I started up here, I tended to get little blobs compared to the end, and that creates a different effect if they all line up or if I split them. So these are the ways we create different effects with our ink, with our pen as we progress. Okay, well, let's just jump to the other side. It's a mistake to finish things at the same depth of plane too much, because exactly the effect I want here will depend on what's happening over here. So now we try and line things up. Okay, so this is actually about a little bit above halfway. So that's about halfway, and there's a little bit above halfway, and what does it line up with? Now, I don't know for sure that this is super accurately placed, but this should be something below there. So, yeah, look, it's not too bad. But now, is that the right place? Where am I wanting this? So we have foreshortening here, of course. And so I'm looking at this width here. So I'm really just drawing the darker values here. Now, it's a bit hard for me to see what's happening up here. I think there's a passageway in there from memory, but I don't really need to have that sorted. I can just copy what's there. And with this bit, I want to just create a little bit of visual disruption to that straight line to just remind us that, in fact, there is a branch coming through which is catching the light. So how do you think it's looking? If you please hit the like button if you haven't already, because that would help me. I hope you're getting some ideas. Now, I can see that in fact that the darkness does need to come down more. So I am going to just so I have more control if I start at the bottom and work up, because then I can make sure that I don't mess up these undulations. And because we're closer down the front here, I can actually have darker, slightly heavier lines than I use further up. Maybe those horizontal lines weren't such a good idea, and if you don't think they were, these ones, then you're welcome. You can learn from the things that perhaps I would reconsider next time as much as the things that did serve me well. And that's the healthy attitude to have with all our drawings. If it ain't a commission or it's not planning to hang in a gallery, then it's a learning experience, as well as hopefully an enjoyable experience. Okay, so now we'll get this part of the building done, and then I'll work out the values for up here. And where is this? It's about here. So it's about level with the door. And it's that distance I'm looking for. And these are perspective angles, so they need to fan upwards in angle as we move up. And now, I just want to... So I'm going to put the first one in, and the last one they've got some sort of modern stained glass, but I'm going to ignore that because I think that doesn't suit my purposes here. Actually, I'll turn that into the downpipe, and that will let me just bump this window a little bit further over, which I think will work better. And I can let that window become slightly looser in its mark language to help indicate that it's further away. And we have this spot, which is about there. It's about level with that. Maybe it's a little bit higher. This angle's up slightly. Maybe not quite that much, but almost. A very small chimney up here, so let's do our best to keep it very small. In my experience, it's really easy to let chimneys become bigger than they should be. So, how's this going, do you think? Remember, all the time what we're wanting to do is have this grassed area feel a tangle of overgrowth and overgrowth of undergrowth. See, these shadows can still come down more. These marks down here will help us read what we're looking at and kind of understand. So. Right, so let's just strengthen this or parts of this a little. Certainly the parts that are closest to us here, we'll firm them up a bit. And we've got this shadow under here. So we want to include that. This is a lighter value than we have elsewhere, so I do want to keep it lighter. And I want to do my best to protect the columns. And we have something similar here. We have hatching for the eaves. Okay. Just strengthening this line here, but I don't want to draw a straight line because it's a grass line, and so a straight line wouldn't capture that. Now we're sort of getting pretty close. We've got the tree to go, and then we've just got whatever final adjustments we feel that we need to make when we actually see it very close to being finished. Yeah, definitely gone too heavy in here, and this and that is way too close when that is so much darker than this. So there's a take home for me. But the rest of it, I'm happy with. Now, okay, we do have these. Let's just get a little bit of texture on the roof. And as these move towards the center, they do become slightly more upright. Now, this tree is where we want to sort of hide this line, so we're going to be a little bit creative with that. Okay, and there is something that comes out sort of here and here on the roof, structurally. So, we've got... Now, I really want this tree, though, whatever I do, to feel like it's some way away. And I do need to... And I don't want to make the branches too thick. Very easy mistake, and one I see all the time. The branches are just too thick, and if you know trees, you realize, well, there's just not room for the branches to disappear before the canopy runs out. Now, I'm not going to try and exactly follow this tree. It's a large and complicated tree, and even if I were doing a tree study, I would still be fairly casual with the exactness, but I would want to try and capture the type of tree it is. So now I'm going to establish the boundary of the tree from this side. Oh, let's just make this simple, eh? Now I'm choosing to just change where the canopy is to highlight the chimney. And this is where we get to use our reference as a springboard, just to simply in the end do what's going to look best for our drawing. This really is an enormous tree, as you can probably tell. And we'll be finished this in a couple of minutes, and I'll just have a little rummage and see if I can find the chat. few shadows here. Sorry, I've been silent for a while, haven't I? Maybe you prefer that. So let's look at what I'm going to do over here. So what I need is to have I find it easier to generally draw the canopy first and then connect it with the branches. Sometimes if the branches are large and complex, we need to get them sorted first, but generally speaking, I don't find that the case. It's also easier to control the width of the large branches so that they more appropriately match what we're looking at in terms of the canopy and its size and the distance there is from here to there. So we're not really worried by this line that was in the wrong place an hour ago, are we? Gosh, it's almost exactly the same time. Now, the one thing I do want to do, though, is I do want to give a sense that this is made of large sandstone blocks. Before I do that, I do want to darken this door slightly, but not too much. Because this is for the colour of the door, not for any shade or shadow. And let me just redo those marks I did for the timber as well. So I need to keep these hatching marks angled so as not to completely overwhelm those timber marks. Okay, that works better, but it's not as dark as in here because that would have been like this, only further back. So I'm just going to suggest some of these stone blocks. Now, I'm not going to draw many of them, but what is important is the ones I draw, the scale needs to be correct, the relative size of the blocks. So to the wall. So to help me do that, to help me just get a sense of how they look, it's not that I'm going to draw these ones, I just want to see how large they look in ink. So, you know, how close these lines need to be. Okay, so in a sense, that's what I want to do, but here. I'm not going to do any lines all the way across because that starts to introduce a level of detail that I don't want. So I do want to keep this nice and light. And I'll start at the top and work down. See, that one's not at the right angle, is it? With these vertical ones, I think we need to go a little bit lighter. We need to make sure that they're as vertical as they can be, but we don't want to put too many in. They kind of mess with the effect when we put too many in. And actually, I forgot this before I did that. There is shadow over this wall. So as tempting as it would be to say, let's just pretend it's not there, it would mean that this wall doesn't fit in with the rest of the patterns, and it would create a nice contrast between this and here. So let's give it a go. And for here, I'm going to do a keep it fairly light. Because it is just sort of backlit. It's not a dark thing. Trying to keep all these lines at the same angle, which can be a bit tricky. And I just don't want to let too much ink get into any one place, because I do want a reasonably even value over this. Sometimes having a pen and marking it so that you know which one it is that's a bit dried out can be helpful for these sorts of things when we want a lighter effect. Yeah, I think that just blends in and we kind of read everything a little bit better now. And I might just slightly darken this where it comes up against the lighter part of this bush, just to create a more interesting gap between the two. Don't want to make the whole wall like this, but I think that will help just with the sunlight effect. We can't draw the light. What we can do, and that works better, I think, we can accentuate though the white paper in some way. All right, look, I think for what it is, we've done enough here. So let's do the reveal, shall we? Please hit the like button if you haven't already, and if you've joined late, please go back and look at the start. In some ways, I feel like the start process is perhaps more important, because I always feel that it's more of a challenge to start a drawing than it is to do the second half. The second half is the fun part, which is why you need to persevere even if you don't think it's going to turn out, because you'd be surprised. This has actually turned out a bit better than I thought. Just this is the problem, but certainly this is no longer a problem. And now we have the better angle for, I think, visually, no problem at all. Now, this tape, because I've been leaning on it, I need to go extra slowly taking it off, because having leant on it, it's more likely to stick. Although this morning, I actually tore the paper, but that's mostly because I was going too quickly. And one trick I've been told is to use a hairdryer to heat the tape before you remove it, and that reduces the amount of adhesive power that it has, loosens the glue. Yeah, so that's just trying to flick it off my fingers. So here we have our drawing. What do you think? Now let me, I'm going to see if I can locate the chat, and if you have any questions. So I'm just going to basically hit everything I can see on the screen. I'll bring it back to me. No, that didn't change anything. If I hit that, no, that, no, and that, okay. I'm not sure anyone's been able to chat. I should have hit that before I started. Okay, so when I do my third live drawing session, I'll know how to keep the orientation correct and to enable live chat at the start. So look, anyone who's been watching, do you have any comments you'd like to show me? Can someone just type something in so I can see that in fact you can see this and it's working now, or if it was working before, but it looks to me as if no one has used it. So please, can someone please type something in? If nothing appears, I'll assume that this is not going to work for me seeing it. Oh, hello Eddie. Right, great, thank you. Did the option, Eddie, before you go, chat's working? Oh, great, Ian. Was it working the whole time or just now? It's working now, okay. But was it not activated before? Not activated before? Well, I'll get onto that next time. Anyone with any questions or comments about this session? Thanks, Eddie. Any comments or questions about the drawing? I'm sure you'll all agree that this dark patch just is too dark and it just looks like, hang on, I can't see. It just doesn't read for what it is. It just looks like a big black blur. But I do like the grass on the other side. Thanks, me too. I do like the grass on the other side. That works, and that's much more what I was after. Possibly I did try to do that shadow part a little bit too fast. Sometimes you really do have to slow down for what it's going to take, and if you don't have time to give the time it needs, then it's just not the best drawing to do at that moment. Okay, well, I've got a video on perspective to finish off that I want to post later tonight, so I'm going to go do that. Thanks for joining. Please hit the like button if you haven't, and I'll post this photo as well on my channel community page, so if you'd like to have a go at this or the one from this morning, have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.